meat, health, and human nutrition. The complete truth you were never told. For years, you've heard conflicting messages about meat. One expert warns that it fuels cancer and heart disease, while another insists it's a vital part of human nutrition. But what if the truth is more complex than both sides claim? In this video, we're uncovering what the science actually shows about meat's effects on the human body, why the research is so contradictory, and how your individual biology plays a bigger role than most people realize. Imagine standing in a grocery store, staring at two options, a bright red steak in one hand and a plant-based alternative in the other. One promises rich flavor and essential nutrients. The other represents a modern shift towards sustainability and cleaner eating. For years, people have argued about which choice is better for our health. Some say meat is a biological necessity, a cornerstone of human evolution. Others argue that meat is the root of chronic disease, heart problems, and shorter lifespans. Today, we're going to explore a question that has shaped cultures, diets, and scientific debates for decades. What does meat really do to the human body? Is it a vital source of nourishment or a hidden driver of disease? This video is not about taking sides but about understanding the complexity of nutrition science, looking at the evidence, the history, and the real biological mechanisms behind what we eat. We'll break down the controversies, the misunderstandings, and the scientific claims that surround meat consumption. We'll examine the benefits, the risks, the studies that shape public opinion, and the context most people never hear about. By the end of this deep exploration, you will understand not only what meat does inside the human body, but also why the conversation around it is so deeply polarized. Let's begin. The origins of a controversy, the question of whether meat is harmful, did not emerge overnight. For most of human history, meat was not a choice, but a necessity. Hunter-gatherer societies depended on animal foods for survival, and some populations still do. Yet in modern times, scientific research, medical organizations, and public health guidelines have painted a far more complicated picture. Beginning in the mid-20th century, researchers began linking diets high in saturated fat to cardiovascular disease. Some early population studies suggested that people who ate greater amounts of red and processed meat were more likely to develop heart disease and cancer. These findings set off alarms and shaped public policy. But as decades passed, more research emerged, some confirming, some contradicting, and some reframing earlier conclusions. Default text: what makes the topic so controversial is not just what the research says, but how the research was done. Different study designs produce different insights. Observational studies can reveal correlations, while randomized clinical trials attempt to show causation. The public often hears simple headlines, but behind those headlines lies a scientific field full of nuance, uncertainty, limitations, and debate. As nutrition science evolved, so did the conversation. Meat was no longer just food. It became a symbol of identity, ethics, culture, environmental responsibility, and personal health philosophy. Today, the debate is not really about meat alone, but about what we believe food should be in the story of human health. What meat provides biologically. To understand whether meat is harmful, we must first examine why humans have eaten it for so long. Meat contains a range of nutrients that are difficult to obtain from plants alone. These include vitamin B12, heme iron, zinc, complete proteins, creatine, taurine, and certain amino acids in biologically optimal ratios. Vitamin B12, for example, is essential for neurological function and is naturally found only in animal products. Iron from meat is absorbed more efficiently than iron from plants. Proteins from meat contain all essential amino acids in proportions that match human needs. Meat also offers significant calories, which historically made it an important energy source during times of scarcity. Modern discussions of meat often overlook this biological context. The question is not whether meat is nutritious, it clearly is, but whether the negative effects documented in some studies outweigh these benefits. One of the most debated aspects is saturated fat. Meat contains varying amounts depending on the type and cut. While early research correlated saturated fat intake with heart disease, more recent meta-analyses have challenged this relationship, suggesting the picture is far more complex. The effect of saturated fat may depend on overall diet quality, metabolic health, genetic predispositions, and food preparation methods. But even if meat provides essential nutrients, critics argue that humans can obtain similar nutrients from fortified foods or supplements. The heart of the argument, therefore, is not about what meat contains, but about how it fits into modern lifestyles, metabolic health conditions, and long-term disease patterns. The case against meat: understanding the risks. The argument that meat is harmful typically revolves around three areas: cardiovascular disease, cancer, and metabolic disorders. Many studies have observed associations between high consumption of red or processed meat and increased disease risk. However, these studies often involve confounding factors. People who eat more processed meat may also smoke more, exercise less, or consume fewer vegetables. One of the strongest concerns involves processed meats such as bacon, hot dogs, sausages, and deli slices. These foods contain preservatives like nitrates and nitrites, which can convert into potentially harmful compounds during digestion. Some studies associate these compounds with increased colorectal cancer risk. Another concern involves the formation of heterocyclic amines HCAs and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons PAHs, chemicals produced when meat is cooked at very high temperatures like grilling or frying. These compounds have been shown to damage DNA in experimental studies, raising concerns about long-term cancer risk. However, dose matters, frequency matters. Cooking method matters. Meat itself is not inherently carcinogenic. Rather, certain cooking techniques and processed varieties introduce risks not present in unprocessed forms. Cholesterol and saturated fat have long been part of the argument, but the scientific consensus on their effects continues to evolve. Some people experience elevated LDL cholesterol when eating high amounts of saturated fat, increasing cardiovascular risk. Others show minimal change. Genetic factors like APOE variants play a role, making dietary responses highly individual. Understanding the risks of meat consumption requires recognizing that not all meat is created equal, not all bodies respond the same way, and not all studies apply universally. The case for meat: understanding the benefits. While critics focus on risks, many scientists and nutritionists highlight the benefits of meat, especially when consumed in moderation and in minimally processed forms. Meat provides highly bioavailable nutrients that support muscle health, immune function, cognitive performance, and hormonal regulation. For athletes or physically active individuals, meat supports recovery and muscle synthesis due to its amino acid profile. For pregnant women, meat provides iron and B12 needed for fetal development. For older adults, protein from meat helps prevent sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. Some populations that consume high amounts of meat, such as certain pastoral or traditional communities, do not exhibit the high rates of chronic diseases often associated with Western meat consumption. This raises questions about lifestyle, environmental factors, and overall diet patterns. Moreover, when examining the benefits of meat, researchers emphasize difference between red meat, white meat, processed meat, and grass-fed versus grain-fed meat. These distinctions influence fatty acid composition, nutrient density, and even inflammatory markers. The positive effects of meat consumption are rarely discussed with the same intensity as the negative ones. Yet omitting these benefits from public conversations leads to skewed understanding and misinformation. Thank you for joining this deep dive into one of the most debated topics in nutrition. If you found this exploration valuable, share it with others who are curious about health and diet. And if you want more in-depth science-based content like this, make sure to subscribe. Understanding food is the first step toward understanding your health.